equanimity, developing the mind of equanimity, which in other words is freeing oneself from the minds of classifying people or other beings as friend, enemy, stranger. So the reason why we want to be free of the mind of friend, enemy, stranger can be found in just about every religion. Jesus Christ said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." So what Jesus was saying was, from my understanding, was that whoever's in your sphere of influence, you love them as much as you love yourself. And so what he was really saying was love everybody. Love everybody that you come across as you love yourself. Of course, some of us in the West, we don't like ourselves very much. So the instruction, love thy neighbor as thyself, not make much sense.
Not very demanding.
Not very demanding. But I think anybody that is on a spiritual journey, that has a robust and vital spiritual life, must necessarily love themselves. I don't think that anybody who's on a spiritual journey can dislike themselves. It's part of the spiritual journey that you learn to love yourself. And then I think Jesus' instruction was for a healthy person, a person who has a healthy attitude towards themselves, to love others in the same way. So what he's really talking about is unconditional love, right? Unconditional love for all beings, for everybody that you come across. Then in Buddhism, we have a discourse that the Theravadan tradition likes to chant, likes to recite, just about every time they get together or any function or event. They recite what they call the Karaniya Metta Sutta, which is the sutra on loving kindness. And Rumi said, he's one of the great, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm sure you all know who Rumi is, one of the great Sufi mystic poets. He said, "Nobody talks to himself with a loud voice. Since we are all one, let us call out to each other from our hearts, without mouths or lips. Let us give up conversation made with our tongues and vibrate with our hearts." Anyway, all the spiritual masters that I've ever read or have ever read of all have the same kind of message, that at the base of everything is unconditional love. But if we look at our lives, then what do we see? Do we see that we have developed unconditional love for all beings? Most of us, I think, will have to admit that we have friends and we have enemies and we have strangers. I don't mean, when I say enemies, I don't mean somebody that you hate with a passion and want to stab in the midriff with a lightsaber or anything like that. But there are people that we dislike, that when we think about them, the mind goes, oh, no. Or if you see them walking down the street, you quietly walk to the other side of the street and pretend that you're going into a shop that you never intended to go into, things like that. I think we all have that kind of thing in our lives. How many of us can see a beggar in the street and have the same love for that beggar in the street as we do for our own children? So how easy is it to follow this instruction of the great masters, Jesus, Buddha, Rumi, and all the other great masters that say we should love each other without any bias at all? I think very difficult. If you look into your own mind, you think, how can I do this? It's very difficult indeed. If we want to be on the spiritual path, we kind of have to do this work. We have to change our mind. We have to do whatever we can to change the mind from the friend, enemy, stranger, so that we can develop this unconditional love for all beings. it's not easy to tear out all our conditioning, all our habitual tendencies, and to throw them away and suddenly to love everybody. I mean, it's kind of totally impractical. It's not going to happen. So we have to work at it bit by bit. We have to work at it slowly, 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 overcoming our prejudices and our biases and our conditioning. From a Buddhist point of view, all the problems that we encounter come from within. There are no problems outside. Everything comes from within. All the problems come from the mind and the way that the mind has been conditioned, and the habitual tendency, our habitual tendencies. The mind is not a permanent thing. The consciousness is not a permanent thing, and so we can change it if we really want to. So this gives us the opportunity to look into our consciousness, to look into our inner world, and what we see there, if we find something we want to change, we can do so. So if we want to change the attitude of friend, enemy, stranger, then we can certainly do it. It's not easy to change our habit pattern, but if we keep on changing, eventually we can also become Jesus, Buddha, Rumi, anybody, anybody that we wish, that we admire. We can become like that being. The Buddha is never disturbed by any circumstances. Even if he finds himself, he or her finds themselves in the middle of a great war or a great conflagration, their minds stay perfectly calm and serene and undisturbed. What must that be like? Wouldn't that be pretty amazing? What was the thinking behind the world wars? It was enemy. They're my enemy and I have to go out and kill them. No matter what political or social stories you make up about it, what you're doing is encouraging your mind to be hateful to others. And then, if you want the Americans to come in and help you with the war, then they become your allies, they become your friends. And so then they come in and they do all sorts of things like bomb the Japanese. So this mind of friend, enemy, stranger leads to all sorts of very unhappy and nasty kind of results. So from a spiritual point of view, this is a mind that we have to, these attitudes of friend, enemy, stranger is something that we have to free ourselves from, get rid of. So we have to train it over a long period of time. And we can't just follow the instruction, Jesus said, love your neighbor, and your neighbor chucks rubbish over your fence into your yard. It's not easy to say, oh, I love you very much. Thank you very much. From a Buddhist point of view, this is one of our trainings, is that you start with developing equanimity first of all. You don't try to love everybody. So you just view everybody in the same kind of warm-hearted way. So every single action we do is for the purpose of avoiding some kind of suffering or gaining some kind of happiness. All of us want happiness. I mean, you could say, well, some people go to dominatrixes and they get themselves beaten and all that sort of thing. But they regard that as some kind of happiness as well, We might think, what? What the heck, man? But they regard it, they go away and they think, oh, that was a nice session. If you think about it, every single action we do is in search of happiness and to be free of pain. So we might go through a lot of pain, but the end game, the end result that we're looking for is happiness. There's not one single person on this whole earth that cannot go into union with God, or from a Buddhist point of view, can become enlightened. So we all have that nature. Ajahn Brahm and others that work in the prisons, and often they say that the prisoners say to them that they didn't realize that they had an option. So they just follow their conditioning, the way their mind's been conditioned. And so then they get into trouble, they go to jail, and of course in jail everything is aggressive, so it's all just reinforced. So all these negative states, from a Buddhist point of view, all the negative states are they're not part of you. They're not part of the ultimate mind. They are just adventitious, and they can be changed. They can be transformed into something that is much more beneficial. Your personality is not part of you. It is just something that's over the top of the ultimate nature. And so it can be cleared out. And that is true for all of us. If we can see that every one of us has this ultimate pure nature, then it's, again, we have an opportunity to develop an equanimous mind rather than give in to the friend, enemy, stranger conditioning that we've had. The more we can train our minds to look at beings like that, the less we're involved with little petty arguments that make friend, enemy, stranger, and the more open we can become. And that, in its own way, transforms the mind, transforms our consciousness, frees us from the stains and the habitual patterns. Another way that you can develop equanimity is to remember impermanence. Now, if you think about your relationships up to now, how many of them have stayed the same? So the amount of closeness or distance that we have with people are definitely going to change over time. And so recognizing this, again, we can give up this idea of clinging on to friend, enemy, stranger, and develop a much more equanimous attitude. This person, I like this person, we get on very well together, but I know that in 5 or in a little while, this relationship will change. This person might go to another country and never see them again. Whatever happens, it's definitely going to change. In Buddhism, it says that the most valuable person in your life is your enemy. And why is that? Because your enemy shows you what your mind is up to. It very clearly shows you up to what your mind is up to. A friend is not likely to show you where your prejudices and biases are, because the friend is always saying, yeah, you're such a nice guy, you're such a nice person, I love you, I like you so much, and you feel all, and then your mind doesn't. But if your enemy says to you, you're such a BBB, and I don't like you, and I'm going to do something to harm you, then the mind becomes really alert and awake. And seeing how friend, enemy, stranger, when it arises in your mind, can teach you about your own prejudices and your own biases, and how you can transform them into something that's much more beneficial for you. So then you can start using friend, enemy, stranger as something that you can use, that you welcome, because you can transform it. You can transform and understand your mind better. You can understand what's going on inside you better and transform it into something much more beneficial for you. So that's remembering the benefit that you can get from friend, enemy, stranger.